The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the Horizon's Promise. Captain Day Wan stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the main screen. Something was out there in the darkness of space, and it was dying. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal," said Hia Jin from her station. She was his tactical officer, and her voice carried worry. "It's not human. Not any language in our database." Daewon moved closer to look at her screen. The signal pattern was strange, pulsing with an urgency that needed no translation. Something alive was calling for help. "Where is it coming from?" he asked. Hyejin's fingers danced across her console. "Inside the Vorthon Nebula, sir, about 3 kilometers into the quantum distortion field." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. The Vorthon Nebula was dangerous, filled with unstable quantum pockets that could tear a ship apart. Space itself twisted and broke in there, and many ships had vanished trying to cross it. "We should report this to command and move on," Hyejin said carefully. "Going in there could destroy us." Daewon understood her concern. It was the safe choice, the smart choice. But he looked at that distress signal, still pulsing desperately, and thought about whoever was trapped inside that nightmare of broken space. "How long does that ship have?" he asked. The science officer checked his readings. "The quantum field is collapsing around them. Maybe 2 hours before it crushes their vessel completely. 2 hours. Not enough time for help to arrive from anywhere else. If the Horizon's Promise left now, whoever sent that signal would die alone in the dark." "Min Seo," Daewon called to his chief engineer. "Can we survive going in there?" Min Seo was a small woman with sharp eyes and even sharper instincts about machines. She studied the readings for a long minute before speaking. "Maybe," she said. "I can modify our shields to handle the quantum stress. It won't be comfortable, and we'll only have one shot at this. If we go in, we have to get them and get out fast." Daewon looked around at his crew. They all knew the risk. They could die trying to save strangers they had never met and might never understand. But he saw something in their faces that made him proud to be human. They wanted to try. "Prepare for rescue operations," he ordered. "Min Seo, get those shields ready. Hey Jin, plot us the safest course you can find. Everyone else, secure for extreme conditions." The next 20 minutes were tense, as Min Seo worked her magic on the ship's systems. The shields hummed with new configurations, adapted to push back against the quantum chaos ahead. Hyejin mapped a path that curved through the least dangerous areas, though calling any part of that space safe was generous. "Ready, Captain," Min Seo finally announced. "Take us in," Daewon commanded. The Horizon's Promise moved forward into the nebula. Immediately, the ship began to shake. Reality itself seemed to bend around them as quantum forces pulled and twisted at their shields. The lights flickered, and the entire vessel groaned under the stress. "Shields holding at 70%, Min Seo called out, her hands flying across her controls. 65, 60. Through the viewport, Daewon could see space doing impossible things. Stars stretched into lines, then spiraled into points. Colors that shouldn't exist painted the darkness. "There," Hyejin pointed at the screen. "I see the ship." It was unlike anything Daewon had ever seen. The vessel was sleek and crystalline, beautiful even in its damaged state. But it was caught in a pocket of collapsing quantum space, trapped like an insect in amber. "Min Seo, can you stabilize that field?" Daewon asked. "I'll try," she said. Her voice was tight with concentration. "Redirecting power from weapons to the deflector array. This is going to drain us, Captain." "Do it." A beam of energy shot from the Horizon's Promise, hitting the quantum pocket. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, impossibly, the collapsing field began to stabilize. The crystalline ship stopped shaking. "It's working," Min Seo shouted. "But we only have a few minutes before our power runs out." "Hyejin, Get a tractor beam on that ship, Daewon ordered. The tractor beam locked onto the alien vessel and began pulling it free. The quantum field fought back, trying to keep its prey. The Horizon's promise shook even harder, and alarms screamed across every console. "Shields at 40%, Minseo warned. 35. Captain, we need to leave now." "Not without them," Daewon said firmly. "Hold together, girl. Just a little longer." With a final surge of power, the crystalline ship broke free from the quantum pocket. The moment it cleared the field, Daewon gave the order. "Full reverse! Get us out of here!" The Horizon's promise turned and ran, dragging the rescued ship behind it. The quantum chaos chased them, reaching out with invisible hands to pull them back. But Minseo squeezed every bit of power from the engines, and meter by meter they pulled away. Finally, they broke free into normal space. The shaking stopped. The alarms went silent. The crew let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "Status?" Daewon asked. "Shields are at 15%, but holding," Minseo reported. "We're safe." "What about the other ship?" "Scanning now," Hyejin said. "Their hull is breached in multiple places. I'm reading 3 life signs, but they're weak." "Bring them aboard," Daewon ordered. "Medical team to the docking bay." As the alien survivors were brought onto the Horizon's promise, Daewon got his first look at them. They were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Their leader, despite being badly injured, managed to look at Daewon with eyes that held infinite depth. "Thank you," the alien said in broken English, clearly using a translator. "I am Velthar. You risked everything for strangers." "That's what humans do," Daewon replied simply. Velthar reached into his uniform and pulled out a small crystalline object, no bigger than a coin. With trembling hands, he pressed it into Daewon's palm. "A beacon of friendship," Velthar whispered before the medical team took him away. "We will remember." Daewon looked down at the crystal in his hand, then back at his crew. They had risked their ship and their lives for 3 aliens they didn't know. It seemed like a small thing, one rescue among millions happening across the galaxy. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness would one day shake the foundations of known space. 8 years had passed since that day in the nebula. Captain Daewon was captain no more. He had retired from space exploration and now lived on New Busan, a human colony world covered in golden fields of wheat and rice. His days of adventure were over, replaced by the peaceful work of managing agricultural distribution. His office overlooked the main settlement, where thousands of humans had built homes under an orange sky. On his desk, among reports and data pads, sat a small crystalline object. The gift from Velthar had become just another decoration, its purpose forgotten in the routine of daily life. Daewon was reviewing harvest reports when his assistant burst through the door, her face pale. "Turn on the news," she said urgently. "Right now!" He activated the wall screen, and his blood went cold. The Galactic Council was broadcasting an emergency session. A human diplomat stood before hundreds of alien representatives, and she looked terrified. "The Crithian Dominion has declared war on humanity," the news anchor explained. "The Crithians claim we have violated territorial boundaries and refuse all attempts at negotiation. Their battle fleets are already moving toward our colonies." Daewon sat down heavily. The Crithians. He knew about them. Everyone did. They were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, conquerors who had crushed a dozen civilizations. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's. The screen shifted to show Ambassador Jiwoo, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. She was speaking passionately, begging the other species for help. "We seek only peace," Jiwoo said. "Humanity has done nothing to provoke this attack. We ask our galactic neighbors to stand with us against this aggression." The camera panned across the council chamber. Alien faces looked away. No one spoke. No one offered help. The silence was damning. An elderly alien delegate finally stood. "We sympathize with humanity's plight," he said without emotion. "But the Crithian Dominion is powerful. To oppose them would bring their wrath upon us all. The Council cannot intervene." Daewon watched Jiwoo's face fall. She had expected this, he realized. Humanity was alone. Over the next week, the news grew worse. The Crithian fleet was massive, hundreds of warships moving in perfect formation. Humanity's defensive fleet gathered at the border systems, but everyone knew the truth. They were outmatched. Earth's military had maybe 30 ships that could stand against Crithian vessels. The enemy had 300. Daewon tried to focus on his work, but how could anyone think about wheat yields when humanity itself might be wiped out? He found himself staring at that crystalline object more and more, remembering Velthar's words. A beacon of friendship. What good was friendship now? On the 9th day after the war declaration, something unexpected happened. Daewon was walking through the settlement when alarms sounded. Not attack alarms, but the ones that signaled an approaching ship. Everyone looked up at the sky, fear in their eyes. Were the Crithians here already? But the ship that descended through the clouds was not Crithian. It was crystalline and beautiful, just like the vessel Daewon had rescued years ago. A Torvak ship. Within an hour, Daewon found himself standing in a meeting room with colonial officials, watching as alien visitors were escorted inside. And at the head of the Torvak delegation was a face he recognized. "Velthar," Daewon said in surprise. The Torvak had aged, but his eyes still held that infinite depth. He wore a uniform now, decorated with symbols that suggested high rank. When he saw Daewon, something like a smile crossed his face. "Captain Daewon," Velthar said, his English perfect now, "I am pleased to find you well." "I'm not a captain anymore," Daewon replied. "Just a farmer, really. What brings you here?" "War brings me here," Velthar said simply. "I have heard about the Crithian declaration. The Torvak High Command sent me to speak with you specifically." Daewon felt confused. "Why me? I'm nobody important. If you want to talk to our leaders, Ambassador Jiwoo is at the council chambers." "I am talking to exactly who I need to talk to," Velthar said. He gestured to the crystalline object still sitting in Daewon's office. "You kept it. The beacon." "Of course. It was a gift." "Do you know what my people are, Daewon?" Velthar asked. "What the Torvak truly represent in this galaxy?" Daewon shook his head. The Torvak were mysterious. They rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs, stayed in their own systems, kept to themselves. "We are the oldest living civilization," Velthar explained. "We have technologies that make the Crithians look primitive. We have weapons that could sterilize entire sectors of space. For 5,000 years, we have watched younger species rise and fall." "Then why doesn't anyone know about you?" Daewon asked. "Because we choose not to interfere," Velthar said. "We learned long ago that power corrupts, that intervention breeds dependence, so we made a law. The Torvak do not involve themselves in the wars of others. We watch, we observe, but we do not act." Daewon felt his hope dying. "Then why are you here?" "Because 8 years ago a human captain risked his ship and crew to save 3 Torvak lives," Velthar said quietly. "You had no obligation to help us. You gained nothing from it. You did it simply because it was right." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Velthar said firmly. "Most species would have calculated the risk and left us to die. But humans are different. In the years since you saved us, the Torvak have been watching your species carefully. We have seen you share technology with weaker civilizations. We have seen you take in refugees from failing worlds. We have seen you choose compassion over profit again and again." "That doesn't change your law," Daewon said. "You said you don't interfere." "The Torvak High Command is meeting now to debate that very point," Velthar replied. I have been sent to bring you to our homeworld. You, Ambassador Jiwoo, and your highest military commander. The Conclave wishes to hear humanity's case. Will they help us? Velthar's expression was unreadable. I do not know. I can promise nothing except this. I will argue for you. I will remind the Conclave that the Torvak honor their debts, and we owe humanity a debt of life. Daewon looked at the crystalline beacon on his desk. Such a small thing. He had almost thrown it away a dozen times, almost left it behind when he moved to New Busan. Now it might be humanity's only hope. When do we leave? He asked. Within the hour, Velthar said. The Krithian fleet will reach human space in 3 weeks. If the Conclave decides to help, we must move quickly. As Daewon gathered his things, he thought about that day in the nebula. He had saved 3 lives and thought nothing more of it. Now the fate of billions might rest on that single act of kindness. He picked up the crystalline beacon and held it to the light. It pulsed with a soft glow, as if it had been waiting all these years for this moment. I hope friendship is enough, he whispered. The Torvak homeworld of Keltarath was beyond anything Daewon had imagined. The entire planet seemed to be made of crystal, great towers rising from the surface, like frozen music. Light moved through everything, refracting and reflecting until the world itself seemed alive with color. Ambassador Jiwoo stood beside him on the landing platform, her diplomatic robes flowing in the gentle breeze. On his other side was Commander Sung Ho, the head of humanity's defense fleet. The military man looked uncomfortable in formal dress, clearly wishing he was back with his ships. Remember, Jiwoo whispered, let me do most of the talking. The Torvak value careful words over emotional appeals. They value honor, Velthar corrected gently, approaching them. And today, honor will be tested. He led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change, geometry that hurt to look at too directly. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber. Hundreds of Torvak sat in circular tiers, all focused on a central platform where the 3 humans now stood. At the highest point sat an ancient Torvak female, her crystalline skin dimmed with age, but her eyes sharp as diamonds. This was matriarch Telanya, the leader of the Torvak conclave. Humans, her voice echoed through the chamber, carried by technology Daewon couldn't understand. You stand before the oldest civilization in this galaxy. Speak, and tell us why the Torvak should break 5,000 years of neutrality for your species. Jiwoo stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Honored matriarch, honored conclave, humanity faces extinction. The Krithian dominion attacks us without cause, without warning, and without mercy. We have done nothing to deserve this war except exist in space they wish to claim. Many species have faced extinction, another Torvak said coldly. Why should your fate concern us? Because we saved 3 Torvak lives when we had no reason to, Jiwoo replied. Because Captain Daewon risked his entire crew to pull your people from certain death. We ask that you honor that debt. Murmurs rippled through the conclave. A Torvak male stood, his bearings suggesting military rank. This was Korseth, and his expression was hostile. One act of rescue, Korseth said dismissively. This is what you base your petition on? The humans saved 3 lives, yes, but we are asked to risk our entire civilization's security policy. The price is too high. Is Torvak honor worth so little? Velthar spoke up, his voice cutting through the chamber. I was one of those 3 lives. I stood on a dying ship, watching space itself tear apart around me. I knew death was coming. And then humans arrived. We are grateful for your rescue, Admiral, Korseth said. But gratitude does not require us to enter a war. Then what does honor require? Velthar challenged. These humans asked for nothing. They expected no reward. They risked everything simply because others needed help. Is that not the highest principle we claim to value? It is one incident, Korseth countered. One data point. How do we know this represents humanity's true nature and not simply one captain's choice? Velthar touched a control, and the chamber's center filled with holographic images. For 8 years, I have watched humanity. Let me show you what I found. The images shifted rapidly. Human colony ships sharing water purification technology with a dying alien settlement. Human doctors working in refugee camps on border worlds. Human engineers teaching sustainable farming to species who had lost their homeworlds. Again and again, Velthar said, I found humans helping others, not for profit, not for territory, but because they believe it is right. In 8 years, I found hundreds of incidents like mine, humans who risk themselves for strangers. Anyone can be kind when it costs nothing, Korseth argued. What happens when humans gain power? Will they be so generous then? That is the question, isn't it? Matriarch Telanya said, speaking for the first time since the debate began. Her ancient eyes fixed on Day-Wan. Human captain, you have been silent. Tell me, if the Torvak give you advanced technology, if we help you defeat the Krithians, what will humanity do with that power? Day-Wan had been content to let Jiwoo speak, but now all eyes turned to him. He thought carefully before answering. I don't know, he said honestly. I can't speak for all humans. Some of us are greedy. Some are cruel. We're not perfect. Then why should we trust you? Korseth demanded triumphantly. Because we're also trying, Day-Wan said. Every day we try to be better than we were. We make mistakes, but we learn from them. When we see suffering, most of us want to stop it. When we see injustice, most of us want to fix it. Maybe that's not enough for you, but it's what we are. Sung Ho spoke up. His soldier's voice rough but sincere. I command humanity's fleet. I know we can't beat the Krithians alone. But I also know my people will fight anyway. We'll die trying to protect our worlds. We won't surrender. We won't beg. If you choose not to help us, we understand. But know that we'll face the darkness on our feet, not on our knees. Silence filled the chamber. The Torvak conclave seemed to be communicating through methods beyond human understanding, silent conversations passing through looks and subtle gestures. Finally, Matriarch Telanya stood. The conclave will vote. But first, I will speak my mind. I am 5,000 years old. I have watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. I have seen species gain power and become tyrants. I have seen others blessed with strength and use it to spread only death. She looked directly at Day-Wan. But I have rarely seen what you showed, Admiral Velthar. Compassion without calculation. Sacrifice without expectation. These are qualities so rare that when they appear, they must be preserved, not abandoned. You would risk our security for sentiment? Korseth asked, shocked. I would risk our security for hope, Telanya corrected. What is the point of our power if we never use it for good? What is the point of our honor if we abandon those who embody the very principles we claim to hold sacred? She raised her hand, and light flowed from her crystalline palm. I vote to help humanity. Let us honor our debt. One by one, other Torvak began to raise their hands, light flowing from their palms like stars being born. Not all voted yes. Korseth and his supporters kept their hands down, faces set in disapproval, but the majority spoke clearly. The conclave has decided, Telanya announced. The Torvak will provide humanity with defensive technology and military support. But hear this condition. You will not use our gifts for conquest. You will not become what the Krithians are. If you break this trust, we will take back everything we give and more. We accept, Jiwoo said immediately, bowing deeply. You have our word. As they left the chamber, Velthar placed a hand on Day-Wan's shoulder. You gave me my life back once. Now let me help you save your species. Why risk so much? Day-Wan asked. Your people are divided. This could cause problems for you. Because some things are worth the cost, Velthar said simply. Honor, friendship, hope. These things matter more than comfort or safety. Outside, the crystalline towers of Keltarath caught the light of the setting sun, turning the entire world into a prism of color. Day-Wan thought about the battle ahead, about the Crithian fleet bearing down on human worlds. But now, at least, humanity would not face the darkness alone. The Arcturus Gate stood at the edge of human space, like a final door before the storm. It was not a physical gate, but a cluster of space stations and defensive platforms, the last line of defense before the Crithian fleet could reach Earth and the core colony worlds. Commander Sung Ho stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching his fleet assemble. 30 human warships, each now equipped with Torvac shield generators and energy weapons. The technology had arrived just 5 days ago, and his crews were still learning to use it. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the Crithian fleet, his tactical officer reported. 247 vessels. They'll be in firing range in 30 minutes. Sung Ho nodded grimly. Even with Torvac technology, the numbers were against them. But they would fight anyway. That's what humans did. All ships. Battle formation, he commanded. Power up the new shields. Let's see what these gifts can do. Across the fleet, blue light shimmered into existence around the human ships as the Torvac shields activated. They were stronger than anything humanity had built before, capable of absorbing incredible amounts of damage. But would it be enough? Commander, the Crithians are hailing us, the communications officer said. Put them through. The screen filled with the image of a Crithian admiral. Thexanal was a massive creature covered in dark armor, his multiple eyes glowing red with confidence. Human Commander, Thexanal's voice rumbled. You have new toys, I see. The Torvac gifts will not save you. Surrender now, and your species will be permitted to exist as servants. Fight, and we will erase you from history. Here's my answer, Sung Ho replied calmly, and cut the transmission. He turned to his crew. All ships weapons free. Show them what humans are made of. The Crithian fleet arrived like a dark tide, their ships blocky and brutal, designed for nothing but war. They had conquered dozens of species with those vessels. They expected to conquer humanity too. The first volley of Crithian fire lit up space with deadly light. Missiles and energy beams hammered into the human defensive line, but the Torvac shields held, absorbing impacts that should have torn the ships apart. Return fire, Sung Ho ordered. The human fleet responded with their new weapons. Beams of pure energy gifted by Torvac engineers lanced out across the darkness. Where they hit Crithian shields, explosions bloomed like flowers of destruction. The Crithians seemed surprised that their first attack had failed. They were used to breaking enemy lines immediately, but the humans held position, their ships standing firm. Sir, we're holding them, the tactical officer said with amazement. The shields are at 80% capacity and stable. Don't celebrate yet, Sung Ho warned. They're just testing us. He was right. The Crithian fleet regrouped and came again, this time in a focused assault on the human left flank. The weight of their attack was devastating, hundreds of weapons firing in unison. Left flank shields at 60%, Tactical reported. 50%. They're concentrating fire. Lieutenant Jinnah commanded the fighter squadron assigned to that flank. She was young but brilliant, and she saw the danger immediately. All fighters, follow me, she transmitted. We're going to hit their formation from the side. Her squadron of 30 fighters broke formation and dove into the Crithian fleet like sharks into a school of fish. They were too small and fast for the capital ships to track easily, and their new weapons could damage the larger vessels. Target their weapon arrays, Jinnah ordered. Make them choose between shooting at us or the main fleet. It worked. The Crithians had to split their attention, some ships trying to swat the fighters while others maintained fire on the fleet. The pressure on the left flank eased, and the human line held. But the Crithians had numbers. For every ship the humans damaged, 3 more moved up to replace it. Slowly, inevitably, the human fleet began to buckle under the weight. "Shields at 40% across the fleet," Tactical reported. "We can't sustain this much longer." Sung Ho felt the weight of command crushing down on him. He had done everything right, but it wasn't enough. The math was simple and brutal. The Crithians would win through sheer numbers. Then his science officer shouted, "Sir, new contacts emerging from hyperspace, multiple signatures, unknown classification. Identify them," Sung Ho demanded. The answer came not from his crew, but from a transmission that filled every screen in the fleet. Velthar's face appeared, and behind him, Day-Wan could see the bridge of a Torvak warship. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Velthar of the Torvak Defense Force," the transmission said. "We have arrived to honor our word. Hold your position. We will handle the rest." 50 Torvak vessels materialized from hyperspace, their crystalline hulls gleaming even in the darkness of battle. They were smaller than the Crithian ships, but moved with impossible grace, like dancers among the clumsy giants. "What are they doing?" Sung Ho muttered. The Torvak ships moved into position around the human fleet, and then they did something that made every sensor on every ship scream warnings. A field of pure quantum energy expanded from the Torvak vessels, washing over both fleets like a tide. "Sir, the Crithians' long-range weapons are offline," Tactical reported in shock. "All of them. The quantum field is disrupting their targeting systems." Thexnel's face appeared on screen again, but now he looked furious instead of confident. "What is this? What are you doing?" "Leveling the playing field," Velthar replied calmly. "The Torvak will not fight your war for the humans, Crithian. But we will ensure the fight is fair. Your ships against theirs. Your weapons against theirs. No more overwhelming force. Just combat. Equals against equals." The Crithian admiral's expression shifted from fury to fear. Without their long-range advantage, without the ability to simply overwhelm through numbers, the battle became something else entirely. "All human ships," Sung Ho transmitted, a fierce smile on his face. "Now we show them what we've got. Bo-Ra, execute Plan Delta 7. Bo-Ra was his strategic advisor, and she had been preparing for this moment. She had studied Crithian tactics for months, looking for weaknesses. Now her knowledge would matter. "All ships, target their command vessels," Bo-Ra's orders went out across the fleet. "They coordinate through centralized control. Break their communication ships, and their fleet becomes chaos." The human ships moved with new purpose, their attacks focused and precise. They weren't trying to destroy the entire Crithian fleet anymore. They were trying to break it apart, to turn it from a unified force into scattered fragments. Jinnah's fighters screamed through the Crithian formation, targeting communication arrays and coordination nodes. The new Torvak weapons cut through Crithian armor like it was paper. "Their formation is collapsing," Tactical reported. "They're losing cohesion." Thexnel tried to rally his forces, but without long-range weapons and with their coordination breaking down, the Crithian fleet couldn't maintain its assault. Ships began to pull back, trying to regroup. "Press the advantage," Sung Ho ordered. "Don't let them reorganize." The human fleet pushed forward, and the Crithians, who had never known defeat, discovered what it felt like to be on the losing side. Their mighty warships, built to crush worlds, fell back before human determination and Torvak honor. Finally, Thexnel made the only choice left to him. "Crithian fleet, withdraw. All ships, retreat to hyperspace." The Crithian vessels turned and fled, their dark hulls vanishing into the light of hyperspace jumps. The Battle of Arcturus Gate was over. A cheer erupted across every human ship. They had won. Against impossible odds, against a force that had conquered dozens of worlds, humanity had stood firm and driven them back. Sung Ho opened a channel to Velthar's ship. "Thank you. Without your help, we would have lost." "You would have fought anyway," Velthar replied. That is why we helped. The Torvak did not win this battle, Commander. We simply ensured it was fought fairly. The victory belongs to humanity. As the human fleet regrouped, treating wounded and repairing damage, word of the battle spread across the galaxy. The Crithian Dominion, undefeated for a century, had been turned back by a species everyone had considered weak. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity differently, and in the Torvak conclave, even Korseth had to admit that perhaps, just perhaps, they had backed the right species. 6 months after the Battle of Arcturus Gate, the war was over. The Crithian Dominion, having suffered 2 more defeats at human hands, sued for peace. The negotiations were surprisingly brief. The Crithians simply wanted to end the conflict and return to their space. Now, Ambassador Jiwoo stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time, the chamber felt different. Where before she had begged for help to silent indifference, now hundreds of alien species watched her with respect and curiosity. The Council recognizes Ambassador Jiwoo of humanity, the Council speaker announced. Jiwoo had prepared a speech about peace and cooperation. But standing there looking at the faces that had abandoned her species when they needed help most, she decided to speak from the heart instead. 6 months ago, I stood here and asked for help, she said simply. None of you answered. My species faced extinction, and you chose to look away. The chamber shifted uncomfortably. Several delegates had the grace to look ashamed. I don't say this to blame you, Jiwoo continued. Fear is a powerful force. The Crithians scared you, and I understand that. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember that when it mattered most, only one species stood with humanity. The Torvak, who owed us nothing but a debt of honor, risked their neutrality to help us. That is the kind of ally that matters. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity survived. We won. And now dozens of you want to establish diplomatic relations with us, to trade with us, to be our friends. Where were you when we were dying? A brave delegate stood up, an insect-like creature from the Vertex Collective. We were wrong. We let fear control us. But surely you understand, Ambassador. The Crithians have crushed so many species. We thought they would crush you too. Then you don't understand humans, Jiwoo replied. We don't measure our chances before we decide to fight for what's right. We don't calculate whether kindness will benefit us before we offer it. Maybe that makes us foolish in your eyes, but it's who we are. Another delegate spoke up, this one from the Kordax Republic. What does humanity want from the Council? Revenge for our inaction? Punishment? We want nothing, Jiwoo said. We'll establish relations with species that approach us in good faith. We'll trade with those who offer fair deals. And we'll remember who stood with us when it mattered. That's all. The Council speaker cleared his throat. There is another matter before the Council today. Admiral Velthar of the Torvak has requested permission to speak. This is highly unusual, as the Torvak rarely involve themselves in Council proceedings. Velthar entered the chamber, Daewon walking beside him. The former captain had insisted on attending, though he felt out of place among diplomats and politicians. Honored Council, Velthar began, his voice carrying across the vast space. I come before you to propose something that has not happened in 500 years. I propose that humanity be granted a seat on this council. The chamber erupted in shocked voices, species shouting objections, others expressing support, chaos spreading like wildfire. Order, the speaker demanded. This is unprecedented. Humanity is young, barely established. They have been spacefaring for less than 200 years. Age does not determine worth, Velthar countered. The Council has species that are thousands of years old, and yet they hide when danger approaches. Humanity has been in space for a fraction of that time, and they stood against the greatest military power in this sector. They had your help, someone shouted from the crowd. They had our help leveling the playing field, Velthar corrected. The Torvak did not fight their war for them. We merely ensured fairness. The victory was theirs. Korseth, the Torvak who had opposed helping humanity, stood up. Everyone in the chamber held their breath, expecting him to argue against Velthar's proposal. I voted against helping the humans, Korseth said bluntly. I believed they were not worth the risk to Torvak's security. I was wrong. The chamber fell silent in shock. For 8 years, at Admiral Velthar's request, I supervised observation of humanity, Korseth continued. I looked for evidence that they were like other young species, greedy, aggressive, short-sighted. Instead, I found something else. He activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber. Human colony ships sharing water purification technology with desperate alien refugees. Human doctors working in disaster zones on worlds that weren't their own. Human engineers teaching sustainable farming to species whose worlds had been devastated by war. Again and again, Korseth said, I found humans helping others, not for territory, not for resources, not even for gratitude. They helped because they believed it was the right thing to do. He looked directly at the council. This council talks about unity and cooperation, but when was the last time any of us actually sacrificed for another species? When did we last risk our own security to save strangers? The humans do this constantly. They do it without thinking. It is simply their nature. One species being generous doesn't mean they deserve a council seat, a delegate argued. You're right, Velthar agreed. But there's something else you should know. He pulled out the crystalline data node, the one he had given to Day One 8 years ago. He activated it, and new images appeared. These were recordings from the node itself, captured over 8 years of sitting on Day One's desk. The council watched as Day One dealt with refugees arriving at New Busan. He could have turned them away. The colony had limited resources. Instead, he had found homes for them and shared their food stores. They watched as he mediated a dispute between human settlers and a group of alien traders, finding a compromise that satisfied both sides when he could have simply favored his own people. They watched hundreds of small moments of kindness and fairness recorded by the beacon that had sat unnoticed on his desk. The beacon was a test, Velthar admitted. I gave it to Captain Day One 8 years ago, and it recorded everything it saw. I wanted to know if his act of saving us was an exception or an example. Now you know the answer. Day One looked shocked. You were spying on me? I was verifying humanity's character, Velthar said without apology. Forgive me, old friend, but the stakes were too high to trust blindly. I needed proof that humanity deserved what I was willing to risk for them. Jiwoo's assistant, Tae Young, whispered in her ear, This is it. This is our chance. The council speaker called for order. A vote will be held, all in favor of granting humanity a seat on this council. Lights began appearing across the chamber as delegates voted. Not all voted yes. Many species still feared what humanity might become, still worried about the implications of giving such a young race a voice in galactic affairs. But enough voted yes. The Torvak vote carried immense weight, as did the votes of species who had seen human kindness firsthand. When the count finished, the result was clear. The motion passes, the speaker announced. Humanity is granted a seat on the Galactic Council. Jiwoo felt tears threatening but held them back. She bowed formally to the council. Humanity accepts this honor with humility. We promise to use our voice to advocate for peace, for justice, and for the protection of all sentient life. After the session ended, Daewon found himself alone with Velthar in a quiet corridor. Why did you do all this? Daewon asked. The Torvak could have stayed neutral. You could have watched from the sidelines like you always do. Because in 5,000 years, I have rarely seen something worth believing in, Velthar said quietly. My species has grown cynical, Day One. We have seen so many civilizations rise and fall, seen so much cruelty and greed, that we stopped believing anyone could be truly good. We retreated into our isolation and told ourselves it was wisdom. He placed a hand on Day One's shoulder. Then you came along. You risked your ship and crew to save 3 strangers you owed nothing to. And in 8 years of observation, you continued to be exactly who you were in that moment. No calculation, no corruption, just consistent, genuine compassion. I'm just one person, Day One protested. No, Velthar said. You are an example of your species, and your species gives hope to an ancient race that had forgotten what hope felt like. That is worth more than any technology, any weapon, any strategic advantage. It is worth risking everything to preserve. Somewhere on the human colony of New Busan, Lieutenant So-hee was piloting a routine patrol when she picked up a distress signal. A small alien scout ship had suffered engine failure and was drifting into a dangerous asteroid field. Command, this is Patrol 7, she transmitted. I'm picking up a distress call, requesting permission to render assistance. Permission granted, came the response. Remember protocol. I remember, So-hee said, adjusting her course toward the stranded vessel. We don't leave anyone behind. As she moved to rescue strangers she had never met and might never see again, she had no idea that her action would be observed by alien scouts who would report back to their governments about human character. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would, in time, lead to new alliances and new friendships. She just knew someone needed help, and she could provide it. That was enough. In the Galactic Council chambers, the lights of 1,000 worlds glittered like stars, and among them now shone a new light, representing a young species that had learned to reach for the stars while never forgetting to extend a hand to those who fell. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not through conquest or wealth, but through something far more powerful. They had arrived through kindness, honor, and the simple belief that helping others was always the right choice. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again.